we are continuing after the Jerusalem Council. And Paul and Barnabas, and along with Judas and Silas, back to Antioch with the written letter. Okay, so it was very historic moment that Paul now could preach the gospel without any objections from the former Jerusalem church members. Okay, it's been objected very strongly as they traveled during the first missionary journey. Now it's clear. So God gave Paul strengthened and a new vision toward the ministering entire Jerusalem, entire Roman Empire. Okay, now with that vision and strengthening, Paul suggested Barnabas, okay, let's go back to the mission field in which we planted churches, okay, to give them strengthening, and we give them new Bible teachings and encourage them to obey the Great Commission and so on. Okay, that would be the second missionary journey. This suggestion was made here in AD 49, right after the Jerusalem Council. Okay, so AD 49 is very, very much special year. Okay, in terms of here, James wrote a letter to his disciples in Turkey here. Okay, second event is Jerusalem Council, and now separation issue all took place here in AD 49. Are you with me? AD 49. Okay. Now, upon Paul's suggestion to Barnabas, and Barnabas, in his reply, saying that, let's take John with us. Okay? It was Barnabas' suggestion. Why? Because John is what? John is what? Marcus. Okay? Who is Barnabas' sister's, Maria's son, nephew. So it was Barnabas' idea to take him with them, to make him more experiencing missionaries in the days to come, for the encouragement, okay, strengthening Mark. But it was a surprising response from Paul. Paul said this, no, I don't want to take Marcus with us because he had deserted us. In other words, he left during the time of first missionary journey in Perga, Pamphylia. In the map here, Perga, right here. Okay? Remember the Perga during the first mission here? So Paul said, he deserted us. He did not say he left us. He changed his mind and deserted us in this mission field. So we were alone without him. And really discouraged Paul so much when Marcus left. Okay, so it was Paul's mind that this boy is not committed mission worker. He will change his mind at any time, at his will. So I don't want this kind of man. Because of this, and Bible said that they had such a sharp disagreement. You see, Bible expressed sharp disagreement. You see, because of this, listen to me carefully, because of this, when church had an issue and ended up with the separations, we always have a Bible reference of this. When church is separated, in their separation sermon on Sunday, and they try to justify their separation decision by way of using this instant. You see, Paul and Barnabas, they had a sharp disagreement and ended up with the separation. So separation is biblical. So don't forget that when you have that kind of experience, please use that reference. I will not suggest you, but for your reference right here. See, that is a historic moment also when God's time comes. God wanted to them separate because their ministerial style is so different. It was God's design, I would say. And Barnabas, I consider Barnabas has only a local mission-minded man. Here, look at this map here. Barnabas' mission vision was limited to Cyprus, which is his hometown. And along with this area, Samaria, Judea, Samaria, and Syria. In this area, limited to this area. That was a Barnabas mission mind. He was a good man, very gentleman, spirit-filled, man of faith. But his mission territory, was limited to this area. No wonder later in AD 61, you write down that Barnabas was killed here in Cyprus because he was ended up with, martyrdom in his hometown as he preached the gospel in his hometown. There are many God's servants called missionaries, only limited to their mission territory to certain area. But Paul was different. Paul's mission territory covers here entire southern Roman Empire up until where? Spain, Portugal. So it's a different perspective possessed by the servants of God. I will not say which person is better or not. No. Every person, God's servants, have different God's gift. Different gift, different measure of gift. Different measure of faith, different measure of grace. Romans chapter 12 says so. So everybody has a different talent, different measure of talent, gifts, and vision, and faith, even grace. Okay? It's not an issue of good or better or good or worse. Okay? Everybody is ordained by God to fulfill certain mission with God's given measure, means size of gift, it's size of grace and faith. Everybody is different. See, here again, Barnabas' gift and God's vision for his life was different from Paul's. Therefore, it's better separate them. Okay? In the eyes of God, they were created differently. So, until such time, they could work together. Okay? But when time comes, it's better for them to separate and concentrating on their own given missions and their specialty. Okay, now it's a time right here for their separation. Now, later, Barnabas took Marcus, and said they went to Cyprus. That is Acts 15:39 recorded there. Okay? Listen to me carefully here. Now, the writer of book of Acts, who is the writer? Luke. Okay? Luke, when he was writing this story, you see here, Acts 15:39 is the last recording on the ministry of Barnabas. No more Barnabas stories thereafter. So this is a so turning point right here. Okay? And Luke said, Barnabas took Marcus with him to where? Cyprus. And period. Then we don't know thereafter what had happened thereafter in the life of Barnabas. Okay? Later in Galatians, which I'll tell you next lecture, okay, Barnabas was in the Antioch. However, this is the moment where no more Barnabas' ministry story. Okay? Acts 15:39. Then, period. Then, Paul's story. Okay? Now, starting more in detail. Luke was focusing on the stories on Paul and his ministries in the remaining part of entire book of Acts. Paul's story. That's why I put down the end of Barnabas' story. Okay? Now, later, Barnabas took Marcus to Cyprus. Remember that? Now, what happened to Mark? Mark joined Peter's ministry. Mark. Okay? Now, Peter said in his letter, 1 Peter, it's AD 64 was written, 1st and 2nd Peter, AD 64. And 65, he died in upside-down cross. In 65. So 1 year prior to his crucifixion, Peter wrote First Peter and 2nd Peter. Okay? In his 1 Peter chapter 5:13, he recorded this. Marcos is my son. Okay? Now, we are assuming that the 1 Peter and 2 Peter, these two letters were written by Marcos. Okay? Upon Peter's receiving messages, verbally expressed it, Marcos was the one who wrote in his hand. That much Marcos was all the time along with Peter. Okay? Now, Peter died here in 65. Marcos died around plus and minus 80, 70. 80, 70, around that time, Marcos. In Alexandria, Egypt. Peter was crucified in Jerusalem. Peter and Marcos was carried by chariot. You know chariot? Horse chariot. He was dragged by a horse chariot and killed. In where? Alexandria, Egypt. Now, on the part of Paul's ministry, we will study the next week here. Paul appointed Timothy as his spiritual son. Timothy was not a full-blooded Jew. He was half-blooded Jew, you know. Okay? His mother's side, Jewish, but his father's side, Greek. Timothy. Because it was God's design to have a Timothy who has a double culture background. It's one step forward toward world missions. Okay? One step forward. It's God's design. So the Timothy carried two cultures, Jewish culture and Greek culture. So it is far better than diaspora. See, Paul was diaspora. Peter was not. That's why Peter has very limited mindset, okay, focusing mainly on his own people and his own territory. But Barnabas was diaspora. Okay, his vision went all the way to Cyprus. Now, Paul also was diaspora, but his vision went all the way to southern parts of Roman Empire. Now, to support Paul's vision, Paul needed Timothy, who possessed double cultural mind. See, those you are sitting here, you all already have given the double culture. Okay, not limited to your own culture. Not only that, your children are Timothy. You see? What are God's blessings? Your children are Timothy. God will use your children to expand ministries toward international community around the world. Now, Timothy, there are 2 times Timothy was called by Paul, say, my son Timothy. And 2 Timothy 1:2, he said, my dearly beloved son Timothy. It's a special emphasis. And 1 Timothy 1:2 said, my son Timothy. And 2 Timothy 1:2 said, my dearly beloved son Timothy. Okay? Now, see, when they start second missionary journey, which we will study next week, in the first time, Paul took Silas. Remember the Silas? He went back to Jerusalem, okay, after the Jerusalem Council report to the Antioch church, and Paul appointed him as his co-worker, Silas. However, Paul, in his beginning of second missionary journey, he went back to Lystra, which we will study, and pick up Timothy. Okay? In the beginning of second missionary journey. Then, after picking up Timothy, from that time on, became the right-handed person, spiritual son of Paul. Okay? Not the Silas. So Silas was assisted. He was assistant to Timothy and Paul. Later, his name disappeared in the second and third and fourth missionary journey. Isn't it interesting? Now, there are two issues. So right here, the Barnabas is a human-oriented man. His leadership is human-oriented man. As opposed to Paul, he was a task-oriented man. In view of the story of the Mark story, see, in considering Mark, Barnabas handled the Mark as a person, human-oriented. Let us give him a second chance. Okay? Let us take care of him because he has been disappointed. And he got hurt. Therefore, we need to revive him, hoping that God will use him for his glory in the days to come. But Paul was very much different view on Mark, that God will not use that kind of, failure. That was Paul's mind. Okay, he was very much job-oriented. We have to go further to entire, at least the southern part of Europe, to carry the gospel of Jesus. God will not use such a dropping person, just changing mind in the middle of the spiritual battle. So Paul was very much task-oriented man. Okay? But later, as we study further later, Paul changed his mind little bit toward human-oriented plus task-oriented at the same time. Mixed leadership. As they become mature and have more experience in dealing with men and dealing with the ministers, dealing with the servants, dealing with the Christians in international communities, his mind has been slowly changed toward the human-oriented plus job-oriented combination of it. You can see God's interference in his life in dealing with the people and ministries. But in the beginning, it was a hard time. In the beginning, he did not look at a person. He only looked at the Great Commission. Okay? You can see this kind of stories, recorded in the Bible. Now, this is end of the lecture 7. Paul and Barnabas separated. Okay? I will give you the one more lecture in lecture 8. That is a very, very important lecture. Okay? You look forward to seeing that. In Jesus' name, amen.